Good evening. I'm just waiting for a few more people to join. Hi, Kiara.
Hi Barry, how are you? Can you
Very
hear
well,
me?
and you? Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. I'm so sorry, Shyama won't be able to
Oh,
allow for to be here to introduce.
oh, that's
But I'm happy to do that.
minus points for her.
Oh no. He'll come later. I'm happy to take over the role.
Awesome. Thank you.
So,
Did she share the rough agenda with you?
no, I don't think so.
Okay,
Let me just
I can fix that quickly.
check. She might. Thank you.
Sorry, everyone. I think we're just waiting for a couple more people to join. And unfortunately, there's been a slight change in chair for this evening. So Kiara is just familiarizing herself with what is a bit of a surprise agenda. I'm slowly actually going to start letting everybody see. I have the power to let you talk. I can switch you off too. There's no pressure to switch on cameras, but please feel free to ask questions or chip in. That is a lot of the point of this exercise, is that you get a chance to ask questions. Now, only about 5 minutes ago, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. There we go. Kiara, are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm happy to start when you are.
Yeah, I think we should start. We're a little bit over time already. I don't want to keep people too late. Kiara?
Oh, would you like me to begin?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Kiara Naidu, and on behalf of SAMSA, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you for joining us this evening. Thank you for giving us your time, and I really hope you guys can take something away from this. We are thrilled to have you here as we wrap up our MPS week with an insightful webinar featuring our esteemed guest, Dr. Hitzeroth from the Medical Protection Society. Throughout this week, we've highlighted the incredible support and services that MPS provides to medical students, interns, and professionals. Tonight, we'll delve deeper into how MPS can protect and enhance your medical career with invaluable medical legal guidance and resources. Before we get started, I just want to thank Barry so much for organizing this webinar and organizing the speaker for tonight, and providing us with this platform to provide students with medical legal services for free. During this webinar, you will have opportunities to win prizes, ask questions, and just understand how MPS can assist you as a student. Please feel free to either type your questions into the chat or just unmute during the question and answer session. I'm sure Dr. Hitzeroth is quite happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Barry, and I'd just like to hand over to you.
Thanks, Kiara. And gosh, that sounded very loud. Thanks, Kiara. And yes, welcome everybody. It is a pleasure to see a good few faces, well, names on the screen. Please feel free to chip in, ask questions. There's really, we are not scared and we're not offended. It's all in aid of, if you want to learn about indemnity and what MPS is. Just a disclaimer, yes, I do work for MPS, so does Volker, but neither of us are financial advisors of any sorts. I, for instance, cannot give you any financial advice. What I can tell you is what MPS does. And if you want to have a conversation on a one-to-one level, we can set that up. And then even then I can basically just tell you about indemnity in general, and I can tell you what's available in the market. And the decision would be up to you. I think once we have a look at what MPS provides, it's just incredibly well established. I think let me just get into that presentation and you can have a look and see. So yeah, if you have a look there, next one. I think we've been working on be part of something big. So yes, that is that. If I say we are big, then what does that mean? Medical Protection Society is over 130 years old, spread throughout all corners of the globe, really. I mean, we look all the way from the UK, Singapore, Hong Kong, we go through Caribbean, everything. Our mission, the very reason why we exist, is to protect the careers, the reputations, and the financial futures of about 300,000 members, just from anything that can come about. And we are literally there to support your career, basically from the cradle to the grave. So what does this all mean for you? So we know that you are just getting started. maybe you could perhaps let me know which years you're in the chat, and I'll be able to have a look at that in a minute when I'm done. But yeah, you're still in the infancy of your career. And if we could come alongside you and give you a few pointers on medical legal risk, how it fits into your life and your career, you know, it's almost like something I heard a while ago about the medical fraternity continuously seeks to eradicate the reason for its own existence. So in the same way, Medical Protection Society, with the ethics offerings, with the risk management education that we do, it's almost like we too are trying to eradicate the reason for our own existence. Anyway, I'll be a bit quicker about this. So as students, this is what you can expect from us. So there's full support during your entire student career. And then if we look at final year and all the way to GPs, specialist consultants in state hospitals, you know, there's, as long as it's arisen from your clinical practice, if it's a medico-legal issue, if you are a member, you may ask, you have the lifelong right to request assistance. I think Volker might actually expound on that a little bit more, but I think that is something that nobody else can offer, certainly in South Africa. So why join us? So here you go, all the different benefits for students. And I'm not going to bore you by reading each line, but I think it's quite important that you have a good look at all the different things that are available to you. And then, of course, if we go just a couple of slides back, gosh, where's it gone now? You'll see there, complaints and claims support. If you have an ongoing claim, there's 24/7 counseling and well-being services, all the risk education and support that you could ever wish for. So it's all there. Then how to join, you are very welcome to take a photo of the slide. In fact, what I've done with a few universities in the past is if you share that QR code with your classmates and you can tell me who you've gotten to sign up, then I can throw some Take-A-Lot vouchers at that. And I'm not too stingy. I usually work in around the 250 Rand mark. And yeah, if there's anything that you have your eye on and you can tell me a list of people that you've actually managed to get signed up, then I think it's probably fair to say for about every 8 or 10, I can throw a Take-A-Lot voucher after that. Anyway, you're not here to listen to me ramble on tonight. I'm going to introduce Dr. Hitzeroth now. If I tell you he's a brain, he's a brain. And he is incredibly modest too. So what I can tell you is he has an absolute heart for students and junior doctors. He really cares about you guys, would love to see you do well and prosper in your careers and just have a good sound understanding of your risk management as you go forward. Volker is a South African through and through, but based in Leeds. Sorry for you, Volker. And he is one of our medico-legal consultants. And I think there's very little that he hasn't seen. He qualified here in South Africa at UP, which I hope you won't hold against him. And that was his undergrad, and then he specialized at Stellenbosch in psychiatry. Yeah, and I look forward to hearing what he has to share with us tonight. Volker? Let me just stop sharing first.
Thank you, Barry, and good evening to everybody. As soon as the screen is cleared, then I'm going to start screen sharing. And
Yeah, Barry is just having a bit of an issue.
not to worry while we wait for that.
There we go. Let me just click on that.
Ah, there we go. All right, let me do a screen share, which is down
Technophobe.
there, and there, and so much clickology, and I think we're nearly there. Let me just move it to slideshow from the beginning. There you go. Barry, is it pulled through?
Yeah, it has. Just again, while we've had a few more people join, we are not precious about these. We don't want to make it death by PowerPoint. If you have any question at any point, you are welcome to interrupt us. We've got some prizes during the thing. One of them is going to be for the best question, or most interesting question. So you're very welcome to drop something in there. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. Volker, the 3 people who have told us about their current study year are all 5th years. So pretty deep into their studies by now. Well done, guys, for making it so far.
No, that's lovely. That's lovely. All right. Well, good evening to you all, and it's really good to be here. I'm Volker Hitzeroth, and like Barry said, I'm one of the medico-legal consultants at the MPS, Medical Protection Society. I've been with MPS now for about 10 years, and before that I was practicing in South Africa in private practice, and before that in the public sector. Like I said, it's been a decade here that I've now seen things go wrong in South African medicine. And what I thought to do today is just tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, give you a taste of what is out there from a medico-legal point of view, some of the stuff that I deal with every day. And there are 4 cases that I'm going to discuss and give you some sort of general steer on, quite common problems. And I thought you've attended tonight, so you deserve a bit of advice as well to help protect you. Like Barry said, this is quite informal. I am quite informal. I don't mind if you do interrupt me. I can't see any hands or anything. So maybe if you put the question in, just tell Barry, or let Barry monitor that. And then, Barry, you're welcome to interrupt me, and we'll spend some time answering the question. And please do ask questions, because that's where the interesting things come out. Now, we're quite an intimate group, so you're welcome to ask me the medico-legal questions that you've been too scared to ask anybody else. You can do that, okay? I've got no problem with that, and just pop those questions in. Now, I wanted to speak with you now at this early time in your career, and I saw the 5th year, so thank you. That's lovely. You've done very well, and you've still got a bit of time to go. Fair enough. But well done. You're the young ones in the profession. You're our future. So it's really wonderful that you're here to learn about medico-legal things. I want to tell you about when things go wrong, just a brief acknowledgement. Some of the information I've got is from our larger South African team here at MPS. I only do the South African work, by the way. So every day I liaise with South African doctors, 30,000 of them. I'm not going to give you specific medico-legal advice. And I do want you to note that the cases I will speak about are generally true. They are true South African cases. But of course, I've anonymized them and made them unidentifiable. But what I'm telling you today is all true stuff. Okay? It's not made up. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. I want you to sit back and relax. This is not a high-powered academic talk. I don't have any stats for you. I don't have any graphs for you. Mind you, there is 1 or 2 graphs, but they're easy to understand. So you can actually just sit back and relax and sip a coffee or a tea or something like that. You, ladies and gentlemen, are young, you're clever, you're newly qualified. That's you. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not-so-good street. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Ladies and gentlemen, you will probably succeed. 98.75% you will become doctors and you will be a success. But what if things go wrong? And they will. This is the end of medicine that I see, our team. We see the side when things go wrong. You probably haven't thought much about that, and rightly so, and don't think too much about it right now. But occasionally they will go wrong, also with you. They have with me when I was practicing. Could be anything from minor oversight to a catastrophic error. Maybe as you're sitting here, you're thinking, no, it's not going to happen to you. And that's what every single one of those doctors who asked our help with problems probably thought. Now, just before I show you the next slide, maybe you can put into the chat, and Barry, I'm going to ask you to manage this. Which specialty or field of medicine, so I'm including GP, that's not a specialty, but which field of medicine do you guys think has the highest medico-legal risk? Just type in the field. I can't see it, so I won't know who you are. But Barry, maybe just wait 5 or 10 seconds and then just read me out a few. So the question, ladies and gentlemen, is which field of medicine, which area of medicine do you think has the highest medico-legal risk? There's no right and wrong, okay? So don't be shy.
And I think rather maybe don't use the Q&A. Maybe just put it in the chat if you want.
I can't see it, so
then a few more people can see it.
Yep,
The chat
fair
is
enough.
disabled.
Is the chat disabled?
Yes, it says so when I try to use it.
Okay, let me see what I can do about that. Is that better?
It's working now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you guys for out there.
Thank you for letting me know that.
Just type in the field. I just want to get a feel for you because my next slide shows you which ones has the highest risk.
We got a trend going already.
What is it?
Obstetrics. Got a few neurosurgery, trauma, surgery only. So I assume that's like general surgery.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad, guys. Okay. Should I carry on, Barry?
Yeah, I think so. We've
Okay.
already established the trend.
Now,
First
this
up
is the slide.
OBS and then trauma and neurosurgery.
Now, forgive me for looking away a little bit. I'm looking to my right where there's a bigger screen with the same graph. You can see, according to the New England Journal of Medicine, it's neurosurgery and cardiothoracic surgery. They have the highest risk. And then comes general surgery, orthopedics, plastic, gastro, and then O&G. At the bottom, you can see peds and psychiatry. Now, I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm mighty pleased about that. Okay. Now, that's what the New England Journal published. And I think it's a fair comment and fair graph. But what I want to tell you that in South Africa, we see it slightly differently. And that is those of you that have put obstetrics high up are correct. Our obstetric members have a very high risk. And then comes the surgeons, the other surgeons, and yes, neurosurgery, general surgery, orthopod. So as soon as you pick up a scalpel, then the risk just skyrockets. And then at the bottom, yes, fair, it's the non-surgical specialities. Pediatrics on our side in South Africa is pretty high. And it's got to do with the neonatal.
And picking up.
Sorry?
It's picking up because of the darling lawyers.
Okay, fair enough. So pediatrics is moderately high, and it's coming up, and it's the neonatal babies, and that have they injured neonates and premature babies and cerebral palsy and retinopathy of prematurity, and that. So our pediatrics in South Africa is a bit higher than this. Okay, but it's an interesting graph, I thought, and I share this regularly with audiences just to give them a flavor of what happens out there. So if you are very risk averse, if you don't want high medico-legal risk and the stress that goes with it and the subscriptions that go with it, then you probably want to be in a non-surgical specialty. All right, and this is just another graph that basically shows that the older you get, of course, the higher the risk of receiving a medico-legal incident. And we're talking about claims here, okay, claims and complaints and things like that. And you can see if you're in a high-risk specialty, that's the top line, then you pretty early on in your career, you're going to get a medico-legal problem. And if you're in a lower risk specialty, then probably relatively later. Now, this one, you don't need to read it. Don't spend time. I'll tell you through. The message here is that the risks in neurosurgery are so high medico-legally that there are some insurers and indemnifiers that don't indemnify neurosurgeons anymore. The risk is just too high. Okay. That's all you need to know here. So it's a problem. And we at MPS, we insure, well, we don't insure, we indemnify neurosurgeons. So we have not pulled out of the neurosurgical market. But there are others who just can't carry the risk. It is just so high. Now, we also know that junior doctors have a tough job, but preparing them for when things go wrong can help. And maybe today is just a taste of me trying to help and prepare you, because I was young once too, and I was also a fifth year. And it's a tough time for you guys. So every bit of preparation when things go wrong would help you. It's hard being a junior doctor these days, in South Africa specifically, but of course also across the world. And we know that doctors don't feel protected when things go wrong. And unfortunately, your training in medical law is probably relatively limited compared to your clinical specialties. So you're going to start your practice in the state sector as an intern or community service, or even then as a GP or specialist, and you won't have had much exposure to this. And what I want to do is show you that, or my heading here is, if only I had known. I want to talk to you about common medico-legal pitfalls. Some of the stuff that maybe if you had known, you would have avoided it. And of course, prevention is better than cure. So let's play Doctor. Doctor, you operate and I'll sue. I thought this was just a fun little picture, cartoon that I'll put in there. I want to show you 4 medico-legal pitfall case studies. So these are true cases. These are not the high-powered dead patient 20 million rand claim. On that note, maybe just to let you know, we get claims that come in anything from R1 million, which is relatively modest in our world, all the way through to 25 million. That's what doctors are being sued for at the moment. Our highest claims are above 50 million. So that's the sort of arena that we're talking about when we talk about a claim in alleged negligence against doctors, against a doctor. So that's where you are named as a defendant and you get a summons and now you're sued. Okay, that's the sort of stuff that we see. So I'm not going to talk much about that. I want to talk with you about cases that we see where doctors end up in trouble for common things, like using social media in an unprofessional manner. Now, I'm going to put my head on the block and say that probably all of you on this webinar use social media. You're 5th year, so you're young. This is your world. The internet and social media and all these websites and online links are your world. They're not mine. I'm a bit older than this. So I say that all of you use social media, and I want to now ask you, and you can put it in the chat. I don't particularly mind, but I'm actually quite interested. How many of you know that the HPCSA has a guidance document, an ethical booklet, and ethical guidance on the use of social media in medicine? Again, I can't really see. You can just maybe put yes or no in. I'm just sort of interested. Do students these days know that the HPCSA has a little ethical booklet guidance on social media and this sort of use? My gut feel tells me that a lot of students don't know this because we see when they get trouble. So these are the sort of common scenarios that we see.
It's a resounding no so far.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Then it's good that I mentioned it.
Yeah, so Bungenschlanschla, I'll get to your question about the difference between insurance and indemnifying. So it basically boils down to the difference between what MPS does and a traditional insurer. So I'll get to your question in a little bit.
Perfect. Good question. Fair question. Now, thank you for actually saying no and saying that you were not aware of it. That's a really helpful one, because Then, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to Google, you're now onto all sorts of internet stuff, HPCSA ethical booklet, ethical guidance on social media. And I want you to read that because, and let me tell you why, I don't mean to just cause you time wasting. You're all using social media, and there are so many pitfalls that could damage your career or that could cause you trouble professionally while using social media. And you need to know about that. And here's a few common scenarios. We have scenarios where a doctor or students, doesn't matter, shared or disclosed patient-specific information on a closed residential group. That was one of these sort of secure estate type of WhatsApp group. The people living in that estate had a WhatsApp group amongst themselves to talk about the gardening and the security and all these sort of things. And unfortunately, one of the doctors in the estate, by accident, shared patient information, and there everybody saw who the patient was and what their problem was. Another one is that we have patient-specific information being sent to the wrong email addresses. We've got, sadly, this was a student, ladies and gentlemen, this was a student, a medical student who was in theatre, and he commented about the surgeon doing the operation live on social media, and it was not a flattering comment. The student was critical of the surgeon doing the surgery, and that went on social media, and that did not go well, and the student had a really rough time when the surgeon found out. That student had a complaint at the HPCSA and was sued for defamation. Anyway, we see long email trails, we see departmental WhatsApp groups sharing information that's inappropriate. We see various parties engaging on social media about clinical issues. We get complaints about doctors, review on Hello Peter sites, Rate Your Doctor, MD Doctors ratings, Google reviews, and so on. We see a lot of this happening, and it causes distress and problems for the doctors. Of course, now I've said what we see, but we also have students and doctors misusing social media. And that's where this HPCSA guidance comes in. So my suggestion to you, and we've got a separate talk on social media. I've got that. And if you are interested, then just ask Barry and I can give it to you. It's about half an hour, 40 minutes long. And it's just about social media use and the problems we see with case studies. My advice to you would be very cautious about how you use your social media. Know about these HPCSA booklets, booklet 16, there you've got it. Remember that when you, sorry, is there a comment?
Yeah, so it's been here for a little while. I just didn't want to interrupt you just yet.
Okay.
But on the subject of those booklets, is it 7SN? Unfortunately, it cuts off a little bit. Do you perhaps want to unmute and chat us through what you said? Maybe not.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, sure, no problem. So, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Sure. No, it's just about when you asked about the HPCSA having that booklet for social media. It is, I was actually aware of that booklet being published. It has been for a little while now, but it's also something that they are very vocal about it being in development because social media itself is ever in development. So I was actually just saying that as an agreement to you that there's a lot of pitfalls that develop all of the time with social media because there's things that haven't happened yet that people haven't even done yet, which the booklet obviously won't cover then. So yeah, I was just mentioning that it's ever in development though.
Perfect. And you're quite right. Look, these booklets do need updating, and they are regularly updated, or maybe not regularly enough, but fair enough. Fair comment there, Sivanathan. Remember, if you use things like WhatsApp and photos to ask advice about a patient in casualty or whatever to a registrar or to a medical officer or a consultant, that is patient-specific confidential information, and that is part of the medical records. Be careful. Also be aware that what you post, maybe you've got private opinions about certain political developments, or you've got some sort of naughty jokes or something. Be careful. Photos, body pics, Be careful, never confidential. People can access it, they can take a screenshot, they can forward it, and before you know it, it's on a newspaper. That's why I said, are you okay if what you've got on your social media appears on the Sunday Times front page? Would you be embarrassed? I don't know, but you decide. What have you shared today with a friend? And is it awkward and is it embarrassing? And would it be deemed unprofessional by the HPCSA? Anyway, if you have secretaries in your department or in your practice, they need to be trained on confidentiality and management of your social media profile. And if there are problems, ladies and gentlemen, just ask advice early on, before you engage a patient on social media, before you befriend a patient in the ward. We've had all these scenarios where doctors, particularly students and young doctors, are requested to become friends on social media with patients. Get early advice, okay? Don't fall into a pitfall, don't make a mistake and then regret it afterwards. We've had these scenarios.
And Volker, maybe just something about those departmental groups where
Yes.
like students and interns and the local ComServe, and mind you, the ComServe
Yes.
maybe not so much.
Well,
but
absolutely. I mean,
head
I'm
of
glad you talk about
department
that.
and everybody is
The
on.
point there, ladies and gentlemen, is, yeah.
Carry on.
The point there, ladies and gentlemen, is if you've got for example, now a department, I'm going to just, let's make it the Department of Psychiatry because I'm a psychiatrist, but any department or any hospital group, an on-call group or whatever, the doctors at a hospital on a WhatsApp group. We've seen this many times. You are all on the WhatsApp group because you all want to ask advice from the seniors when you're on call and you want to just say that you're running late and. So there's a group of people who are on this WhatsApp group. And sometimes those participants on the group are non-doctors. It could be, for example, a departmental secretary, or it could be the hospital events organizer because it's a small group, or the departmental events organizer. Who knows? It could be any non-clinical people, or for that matter, it could be clinical colleagues, but who are not involved with the patient care right now. So it could be a different firm, a different day's on-call service. And here you are taking a photo of a patient in casualty and you're sending it to your registrar or to the MO or the consultant on duty that you want to ask advice about this patient. But now suddenly 30 other people get the same WhatsApp in their group, but they're not involved in the clinical care of this patient. So now you've shared a patient's confidential personal medical information with people who are not involved in the care of this patient, who don't know the patient, and who would never be involved in this patient's care. So in a way, you've breached that patient's confidentiality because you've shared certain information about this patient with people who are not involved, non-clinicians, or even clinicians who are not on duty and would never see the patient. So that's the sort of idea that I want to share with you. Be cautious about just willy-nilly sharing patient information on a WhatsApp. It's very quick and easy, and it's very helpful at times, and it might really be useful. But you've just got to make sure you know what you're doing. And there we always ask you and advise you, just find out what the hospital social media policy is. And if there is none, then maybe you should suggest to the hospital manager to get one and make one and find one. So those are the things that we talk about when we talk about the social media problems in my separate talk. Now, sadly, for doctors, we have a lot of this. You won't believe this, ladies and gentlemen, but because you guys are caring and doctors are caring and patients trust you, it has happened, and it happens more than maybe once every 3 months, where a doctor is told something by a patient during a consultation and that disclosure of information to the doctor by the patient is very sensitive, and occasionally it is the disclosure of a crime. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's never going to happen to you. But like I said, it happens. And I'm going to show you on my next slide what it's about. But this is basically where a patient trusts you so much because you're a doctor that they then feel comfortable enough to share with you something they've done in their previous, not life, no, but in their, that they've previously done.
In their past.
So
in their past.
Yes, okay, before they saw you. All right, so these are some of the the admissions that patients have done to doctors, that they've shared with doctors, okay? And you can see some of these are pretty serious. Patients have shared with doctors that they were involved in murder. That was one of my cases. Rape, sexual assault, cybercrime. We had patients who admitted to taking part in cybercrime, assaulting people, left somebody to die, stealing stuff, poisoning their spouse, and killing them, and using an unlicensed firearm to commit a crime. Now, that's quite serious. And now the problem for you is that you're carrying this knowledge. You've now received this, and now you're carrying it. Now you know about it. What do you do with that? And again, come to us early. The moment that happens, come to us straight away, okay? Because it could cause you trouble later on. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but remember your patient has a right to confidentiality. So they've now shared this information in a doctor-patient relationship, and they rightly expect that to remain confidential. But you also have a duty to keep such information confidential. There you go. You have that duty to keep it confidential. But there are some scenarios where you might have to breach that confidentiality, disclose the information. So there's a bit of tension between the duty of confidentiality and the right to confidentiality and your duty to keep it confidential, and the need to disclose certain information, maybe in the public interest. So there's tension, okay? And my advice is always seek our medico-legal advice here, because it has repercussions all around. I mean, if you know that a patient murdered their spouse, that's pretty serious. Okay. Now, yeah, I was also involved in one of these long ago when I was in clinical medicine. I had a patient who told me a particular crime, and it was a serious crime. And then I asked MPS for advice. All right, there's various rules and regulations that govern this. I don't want to bore you with all the legalese. But remember, there is a lot of law that governs this sort of disclosure of information. So it's not a willy-nilly decision. You can't just fire off a quick answer here. You need to get advice, because there are nuances here that the law has to take into account. So get advice early. The question often then is asked is, what is a serious crime? Because there's a difference between a patient puncturing your car and causing you a flat tire, or to somebody else, puncturing somebody else's car, versus somebody who admits to having murdered somebody. So it becomes, what is a serious crime? Because usually you wouldn't breach confidentiality if somebody punctured the neighbor's car. But if there was a risk of death, a risk of serious harm, or if there were crimes against the person, so that's serious assault, or sexual assault, murder, and if there's abuse of kids, those are generally what we would class as serious crime. Okay. Again, don't just go off on a tangent, get advice. Okay, that's why we're here. I mean, if you're a member of MPS for now, I understand you're for free, then ask us. We'll give you advice. Then that's what I said here. Just get advice. Okay. I don't want to go into too much of the advice per se. And I'm gonna maybe leave this one as well. But these are tough decisions where you have to weigh up various ethics and legal aspects. Okay. And we would provide you with some advice on what to do. The next one, sadly, is a problem that we see too often. Now, I want to tell you that because I like young doctors and I want to help them. There's a part of me that has a soft spot for young doctors. And sadly, we see that young doctors also step into this pitfall. And this is where there is a boundary crossing. This is where a doctor engages in an unprofessional relationship with a patient. So it could be a male doctor or male student breaking the boundary, engaging in an unprofessional relationship with a patient. It could be any of these sort of boundary crossings, and they are very serious. And I'm going to probably repeat what I'm going to say now, which is, ladies and gentlemen, the answer here is no. You should not cross a patient's boundary. You should not engage in a relationship with a patient, okay? Don't. The answer is simple. It's a no. There isn't really much debate about it. But I want to tell you, I've had a look at the MPS data for this problem. I looked at all the files we had over the last 10 years where this was a problem. And informally, I've identified 2 types. Now, I don't know you, and I want you just to register these types of boundary crossings, because before you know it, you might end up in a scenario where this is a possibility. Now, I trust that you don't do this, and I trust you've not done it, and I trust you will never do it, which is have an unprofessional relationship with a patient. And remember, it's not just the male doctors and female patients, it's also female doctors and male patients and female, male, male. Okay, we've had it all. But the first type is where this boundary crossing happens during a clinical consultation and during the clinical examination. Okay, and that would usually be, for example, an allegation of sexual assault or rape. And we've seen that, and it's very tragic for the doctors when these allegations come out. It's very serious. This could be career ending. It could potentially end you in prison. The second one is this friendships with patients or having relationships with patients. And maybe in your younger world, it happens on social media. You get a request to befriend, and by now that's probably moved on and I'm out of touch with it. But before you know it, you've built up a friendship and then a relationship with a patient. And again, the answer is no, ladies and gentlemen, you should not do that. And then occasionally we get really bizarre and outlandish and truly unbelievable allegations against the doctor. And usually those are very disturbed patients who might even be psychiatrically ill and psychotic, who make really bizarre allegations. And that's relatively better. But I mean, these are still harsh allegations. All right, so just be careful. Now, sadly, over the last sort of 6 months, I've had to deal with about 4 of these. And of those 4, and I'm sort of just guessing now, but those 4, I think there were about 3 were junior doctors, young doctors, okay, at the beginning of a career. And in some of the cases, I don't even think it was, there were other factors involved as well. I don't want to go into too much of the detail now. But these are serious, and you need to make sure that you never, ever fall into a trap where you either have a relationship or you're even considering a relationship with a patient. During my analysis of these files that we had, and we have many, the cases are very varied. You know, it could be anybody, GP, various specialists, physicians, obstetricians, surgeons. You know, we've had it. There are allegations across the board, all specialties, public and private sector. So there's no particular profile. You know, I cannot say that it is only the specialty. It happens across the board. Yes, it's mostly female patients and male doctors, but we have others as well. Okay, I've said they're mostly GPs, but various specialties. And the patient's main complaint might be a urogenital one. So it could be something about a menstrual abnormality or some pregnancy problems, or, okay, maybe not urogenital, but breast problems, lumps in breasts and that sort of stuff. So be aware. I'm telling you this to warn you that you need to be cautious when these sort of themes come up. And then, sadly, sometimes the doctors take an unnecessarily focused history on intimate details. And I've seen the letters of complaint of what the patients allege the doctor did, and it can be very awkward and very embarrassing. And the doctor, if those were true facts, probably was out of line by asking these very intimate and very personal questions that might not be quite relevant. And then there's usually a physical examination while the patient is asked to fully undress, and then is overly examined, over extensively examined, with maybe intimate examinations of genitals and so on that might be inappropriate. There's poor communication, usually misunderstandings, where it might have been a perfectly appropriate medical examination, an intimate examination, but the patient misunderstood, didn't understand what was going on, and then thought they were being assaulted. Sadly, there are very rarely chaperones present. That's a whole talk and a question that we can answer maybe at the end about asking a chaperone to be present. That is your best protection against such allegations. I had one case where there was an allegation of this inappropriate examination, and fortunately the doctor did have a chaperone present, and it was all above board, and we were able to defend that very easily. And just as a quick one here, if there are such allegations, please come to us straight away, because the HPCSA and the courts, because remember, these are criminal charges, take a very dim view of this. Okay, so you really do need help very, very quickly. It could even be as bad as, and I've had this, where the doctors are arrested at practice. You know, suddenly the patient goes to the police station, and there's a charge of sexual assault, and the police arrive at the practice that day or the next day, and they come to arrest you. Sorry?
Yeah, Volker, so remember we have that video of
Yes.
Ethan.
Yes.
Just for the rest of you, we have this video that we've showed to very mature, experienced doctors before, because we host an annual event called Ethics for All. And in the days when we still did it in person, we actually showed Ethan's video, and it's literally an actor who is working to a script, but everybody in that audience could relate. And it starts with Ethan saying that it was a day like any other. He was going about his business and his practice, and suddenly the police arrived and they said, no, listen, it's there's been this charge of sexual assault and they are arresting him. And that was the end of his workday there. And it took him ages to get defended and for the whole thing to get dropped. But what it boiled down to is a routine examination, cardiology examination. It might even have been part of just a normal exam, where he palpated for the apex beat of the heart without explaining to a female patient what he was doing and why he was going there, and he had to move the breast a bit to get to the apex beat and listen to it. And because he didn't communicate properly, and probably because there was no chaperone around, he ended in some seriously deep trouble. So, you know, the idea here is not to scare anybody, but the idea is to make you aware of this kind of risk.
Well, that video was based on a true story. Okay, so I mean, it is an actor, but that was based on true facts.
Yeah, and you know, we didn't make a big song and dance about it. People were still milling around, they were still finding their seats and whatever. And all we did is we pressed play on the video. And you have never seen, I think that particular time that it struck me so much was in Durban at the ICC here. We had about 1,500 people in attendance, and that entire place felt silent in 30 seconds because everybody could relate.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the thing there. So please be very aware of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. Now that is what happens during the consultation, or for example, an examination. Then about friendships and relationships. Okay. Now this usually happens where there are deeper patient relationships. So it is usually psychiatrists, psychologists, but not only, also GPs and others. It's usually, again, where there's a lot of disclosure of personal information by the patient as part of the consultation, maybe, for example, a mental health assessment. Occasionally, the doctors overshare personal information, so be cautious about sharing your personal information, your life story with patients. Might not be appropriate. And then it builds up. You like the patient, they seem to like you, and you're asked to see them again and a bit more frequent than usual. And then there's an out of consultation contact, maybe a phone, a WhatsApp. You quickly join up. You think it's all still fine, but can you see how this is snowballing? And then there's excessive contacts, and they become quite personal in nature. And then they're not really about medicine anymore. Now it's a bit more social, and so on and so on. And then things become problematic. And before you know it, there's a complaint about you at the HPCSA. And I'm currently defending a doctor with this sort of scenario. And it's really hard going because it's a serious allegation. Okay, again, the courts and the HPCSA take a dim view. So I would want to just summarize here: be cautious, be aware when you get into this sort of this sort of dynamic where you think, okay, things are happening. You need to be aware and be careful when you cross that event horizon, when you can't pull back anymore, when it's now, when you need to be aware that you're being sucked into this black hole. Yes, often it's cloaked care and therapy. The doctors say, oh, I was just looking after her. I was just doing the treatment. We were just doing therapy. It gets very difficult very quickly. My advice to you is just don't do it, okay? If you feel you're slipping and you feel you're entering this sort of event horizon, this black hole, just speak to a colleague, get yourself out of that scenario in a professional manner, write it all down, talk to us, and then manage it very carefully. My last case study, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we see more often than we thought we would. And it was just yesterday or today, I don't know the exact date, where we had a case that we opened where it turns out that there was a consultation, a multidisciplinary meeting. So it could have been state sector, even as I sit here now. And the patient and the family members were also part of that meeting. And the patient had switched their phone on, or in fact, it was a family member who had switched the phone on during this consultation, this multidisciplinary meeting, and recorded the whole meeting with nobody knowing and realizing this. And then the patient and the family, or I'll call it the family, were asked to leave the meeting while the professionals, the doctors now discuss the matter. And the patient left the phone in the room on record during that discussion as well, and nobody knew about it. Now, we hope that there was nothing embarrassing that was said, but you could just imagine how easy it would be for somebody to slip in an unprofessional comment about the patient or the family, or about the treatment, and how very awkward that could be when that recording surfaces later on. So we have scenarios where people record a consultation without you knowing. It happens more often than you think. And it could happen to you. It could be that you are consulting with a patient and or a family, and the patient is, let me take my phone, they're just fiddling on their phone, as we all do, and you're not really noticing, you're not really concentrating because you're talking and explaining about the surgery or the complication. And before you know it, this is being recorded. And you weren't even aware, and the phone just it's lying here on the table in front of you. And it's recording, and you're not aware. So just be aware this happens. For example, a patient asks you if they may record it, that's all above board, and of course you would hopefully agree to that. A family member might ask you that they want to record a consultation, usually also all above board. You just need patient consent for that. But these are all above board. It's the one where you're being covertly recorded secretly. That usually can cause a lot of stress for doctors. We've also had, and I've had a particular case, but I know it's not the only one, is where there was a quick confrontation, a quick discussion in the passage. The patient or the family of the patient catch you on the ward round while you're walking from ward to ward, and they just want to have a quick word and just want to know what's going on with little Tommy or whatever, with her husband or the wife. And they just talk to you while you walk, and you just want to quickly deal with that, and you're walking on. But before you know it, it's been recorded. Okay. So be cautious. We also have surgical procedures that are officially video recorded. The surgeons sometimes do that, a gastroscopy, colonoscopy, or even open surgery, where there are videos that are now available. So be aware. Also, hospital cameras. We've had cameras in the recovery room after surgery that record certain conduct of the nurses and the doctors and the patient. And you might not even be aware of it, but there's a camera in the corner of the recovery room or in the ward or wherever, or in the casualty unit. We can discuss the pros and cons of that and the rights and the wrong of that, but these things happen. All right, so be careful, be aware,
And then
and always act professionally. Sorry.
sorry, but also maybe just the scenario of going into a doctor's tea lounge or standing in a lift and that kind of thing, where patient details get discussed, and there are a whole bunch of people around who have absolutely nothing to do with that case, and
Yes.
end up overhearing.
Now that's an interesting one, Barry, because I've got a true case as well. where there were doctors in a state hospital in a tea room. I think it was, if I remember now, probably the anesthetic room or something, and that was all there in the theatre complex. And one of the doctors came in and was complaining about a particularly difficult patient interaction. And they came in and they just vented about this Mrs. Hitzeroth, I'm making it up now, but they just mentioned the patient's name about how difficult this was. And, you know, they all know this lady and she was so difficult. It turns out that one of the medical students, this is a true case, guys, I'm not making it up because you're a medical student. Turns out that one of the medical students was this lady's family member. And of course, they overheard everything that was said amongst this group of doctors. And that was very, very awkward, because now they were talking about this medical student's family member. So be careful about what you say and where you say it, all right? Always remain professional. So thanks for that, Barry. It triggered my thinking. Okay, there's lots of advice, but I don't want to... Yes?
Volker, sorry, I'm a bit slow on the uptake here, but is it Mr. or Miss Zwane? You've got your hand up?
Yes.
Do you want to maybe unmute? Yes. Hello?
Feel free to ask or type it down and then Barry can ask it. No problem. I mean, maybe, well, shall I just carry on for now?
Yeah, then just very quickly, when we were on the social media,
yeah,
we had a question here, where would you draw the line with regards to social media use? What happens if you share an image with a senior doctor and they share this image inappropriately? Could you be held legally responsible?
All right, there were two parts to that question. Just repeat the first one again.
So what happens if you share an image with a senior doctor and they share this image inappropriately?
Okay, and was there a bit before that as well?
It just said, where would you draw the line with regards to social media use?
Okay. I'll answer it, start broadly, and then I'll zoom in on the question. Remember, social media is not all bad. There are very good uses of social media for medicine and practitioners. And I've now recently actually written a series of about 5 articles about the use of social media in medicine and the medico-legal risks and well, the benefits and the risks from a medico-legal perspective. So maybe, Barry, I'll share it with you and then you can share it with the audience. It's not a secret article. It's published, so it is public knowledge. It's a series of about 4 or 5 articles on that. So there are advantages and disadvantages of social media. So you mustn't be frightened of it, okay? You mustn't avoid it, because going forward, your world is about electronic use and social media and computers and internet and websites and links. And if you are in practice at some stage in private practice, you're all going to have a website, and that's all very good, and it is right. You've just got to learn to manage this social media thing and the websites and everything professionally. So all the rules of the HPCSA apply as they would to normal practice. They also apply to social media and websites. So you kind of have to be familiar with these ethical guidelines, because the fact that you're doing something on social media doesn't mean that the rules don't apply or that there are different rules, okay? So the usual rules of confidentiality and the usual rules of consent and the usual rules of having to examine a patient and take a history, they're all relevant also when you do online consultations or social media posts or WhatsApps, okay? So where do I draw the line? I don't really draw a line. I don't think you need to draw a line. I think you just need to be aware of what the rules and regulations are, and you need to remain professional in your interactions. And there are ways of managing these things. There are ways of managing a request to befriend a patient. There are ways of doing that, and friendly and professionally declining it. There are ways and means of advertising your services when you're in private practice. You can do it, and you must do it, because you're running a business, but you must also do it professionally and follow the rules and regulations. So that's just the bigger answer now. Now, talking about if you're sharing a picture of a picture of a patient, I assume, a photo of a patient. Maybe there's a fracture of a knee, or maybe there's an eye injury, or whatever it is that it might be. Or maybe there's a particular rash on the skin that you want to take a photo and send to a consultant for advice. In principle, there's nothing wrong with that. Just get the patient's consent and say, look, you're the junior doctor on duty or the medical student. You see this rash, you're not quite sure, you think it's this, but you just want to consult with the senior. But the senior is currently at the other office or at the other hospital or is at home. Can you take a photo? Get the patient's informed consent. And then just jot it in the notes. Date, time, patient agreed and consented for me to take a photo of the knee or the arm or the eye and share it with Dr. Hitzeroth, consultant on duty. Make sure that's all above board. There's no problem there, okay? You might not want to share patient identifiable information. So you might not want to say, this is Mr. Hitzeroth. He's currently 52 years old, and he's got whatever embarrassing sicknesses, and he's an alcoholic, and he's got 3 kids. You don't need to share that. That's irrelevant. So I would not do that sort of patient identifiable information. I would keep it anonymized and non-identifiable. And if you do that in a professional sense with patient consent, and you don't do the disclosure of irrelevant information, and the purpose you do it for is to get advice, then that's probably okay. But remember now, what you've got there on the WhatsApp is part of the medical records, okay? You can't now ignore it. You're going to get an answer from the consultant that needs to be put into the medical record. So I don't know exactly how you're going to manage that. Are you going to print it out? Are you going to take screenshots and print those out and put it in the medical file? There are practical difficulties there.
Well,
But
I suppose if there is a move in some hospitals towards digital records,
yes.
you can just add it digitally. But yeah, with paper records, yes, then there would be a hassle.
So you need to make sure that it is recorded, because remember, your management of the patient, I'm just going to put on a little light here. Remember, the management of this patient depends on the answer you get back from your consultant. So that information has influenced and determined your decision-making about treatment. So it's clearly clinically relevant. You can't omit it from the medical records and now prescribe antibiotics. And then if there's a problem, they're going to say, but wait, why Dr. Hitzeroth, why did you write up antibiotics? And you say, gee, remember 3 years down the line, I don't really know. Maybe there was, maybe I did WhatsApp my consultant, but now I can't find it. You've got a new phone by then, and then that is lost. And that would be your defense as a junior. Your defense would be, you asked advice, you received advice, you followed the advice, and that's what you've done. So if you did that in a professional manner with patient consent, just write 2 lines in the notes, then that's probably perfectly fine and appropriate. What the senior colleague does with that information is obviously for them. And there'd be an electronic footprint of what they do. If they now share it with somebody else outside medicine, or with their best friend at a drinking party, or with non-involved people, well, that's obviously their decision. You wouldn't be held liable for their acts or omissions. You would be held liable for your acts and or omissions. So I think as long as you act professionally, that's fine. But let me just reiterate, I think if you guys are starting to do this sort of thing, you just need to know what are the rules and regulations and what are the hospital's policies regarding the use of such social media. What is the hospital policy with regards to taking photos from casualty and sending it up? And of course, you would have to act within that policy framework. You also then need to know, what are you going to do with a photo the day after or the week after, when this patient's been treated and discharged? Now you've got maybe 24 patient photos on your phone. What are you going to do with them? Delete them, double delete them? Where are they now? Stored in a cloud somewhere? And so on and so on. So it gets moderately complicated, and you just need to think through things and maybe familiarize yourself with what's happening. Barry, I see your hands up. Thank you.
No, somebody else has got a hand up.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, I have my hand up.
Thank you.
What happens if, let's say, you have to do something in your practice and you do record it in the patient's files, and then years later you have to use that file as evidence in, let's say, a court case? but the file has gone missing. They can't find it in the file storage. What happens then?
Okay, now that is a very good question, and it is a question we occasionally have to deal with. Thanks for asking the questions, and I'm happy for you to ask these questions. The important thing is, maybe just for you now, always write things in the notes, okay? You are not the custodian of those notes, and I'm talking about a state hospital now. If you were in private practice, well, then those notes are your responsibility. But let's assume this is a state hospital, because every time I've been asked this question, it happens to have been a state hospital. And sadly, we know that occasionally in the state hospitals, files go missing for various reasons. But if you've done your job and you've written it down and that's it, then that's fine. The hospital system, the hospital management is responsible for the storage of those notes. They're also responsible for the retrieval of those notes, of finding them. Now, if in a hospital setting, there was a claim 3 years down the line, and remember these sort of claims happen years down the line, that file needs to be found. And if the hospital cannot find that file, then there's obviously liability with them, because they did not safekeep the records safely or professionally. That problem, the missing file, cannot be thrown at your door. So you would not be found guilty of unprofessional conduct or anything for the file not being found. What the dilemma you might have is that you might be asked to comment on that patient's treatment from 3 years ago, because you might be the doctor. Now, it might be difficult to identify you as the doctor because the records are gone, so they might not know who the doctor was. And they might not know who was the intern on duty or the cosmo on duty or the consultant on duty, because the notes are gone. But be that as it may, if they were to identify you as being the doctor who saw the patient, then your defense, of course, now is hampered because you don't have the clinical notes to defend yourself. And that would be a potential problem. But now remember, if you're working in the state sector, the state ultimately is responsible for the defense or settling of a claim, and it wouldn't be you personally. So the state would then have to go to court and say, sorry, we don't have the notes, we cannot defend this, we need to make a plan or settle it or whatever. So personally, you would probably be less vulnerable and less liable for a problem that the hospital has caused and mismanaged.
Yeah, so then there are just those exceptions where, so yes, the state is responsible for picking up claims. That is where compensation needs to be paid to a patient or their family in the event of negligence or injury. But then the part where the state is not responsible for you is HPCSA investigations and complaints. Volker is ahead of me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you're ever involved in an inquest, and if there are ever any criminal charges like we have seen in the news recently. So those are the 3 things that you need something to cover that gap in your indemnity. And MPS then has a state doctor membership. So if you progress from medical student into intern and ComServe, where you are a state employee, then your student membership will simply evolve with you to become an intern membership and a ComServe membership. And you still get that for free as well as your first year grade 1 medical officer. You would also still get for free. So we do really want to take care of junior doctors. The appetite is definitely there. Volker, sorry, just before we move on, Sivanesan has got another great question here. He said, and it's more to do with that recording of consultations. So he says here, I guess this is more relevant in private practice. Is having your rooms under CCTV security and informing your patients by means of indemnity and signage an option?
Yes.
It could also protect the practitioner in that case, or is it frowned upon?
That's a very good question. And we have doctors ask us this question probably about once a year. Somebody asks about CCTV cameras in the office and in the consultation room. So when you get there, Sivanesan, if that is you, ask us and we'll give you up-to-date advice on that particular question. I don't want to give you specific advice because it depends on a lot of things, but just a broad brushstroke would be, look, outside your practice for security reasons and the ADT security and that sort of stuff usually would not be a serious problem. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. The dilemma comes in if you do it inside your rooms. For example, and let's use an obvious but extreme example, inside the consultation room. Now, you're going to have patients inside those consultation rooms undressing. So you might, on your camera inside the consultation room, record a patient undressing and being there without clothes. Now, that would probably not be the right thing to do. So we would usually advise against cameras inside consultation rooms, or even in waiting rooms. I'd be a bit cautious, but please ask us that advice when you open your private practice, because the law might have changed and new laws might have come in and so on and so on. Of course, recording on a verbal, the recording a consultation per se, you could do. I would suggest you get patient fully informed consent, because now again you've got a consultation on a recording. Where is that stored? Is it on a cloud? Is it across the border outside South Africa into a cloud that is above China or Norway or the US, California? So there's cross-border patient information transfer, which kicks in the POPI Act, just as an example. So there are ways and means of recording a consultation. That per se is not a problem. If you get the right patient consent, informed consent, you get POPI consent, and so on, which you can all put into your terms and conditions, so it's not insurmountable. There are ways and means of managing this. There are, in fact, many patients who might want to record a consultation with you. And for example, if there's an informed consent discussion, or if there's the treatment options are discussed, perfectly reasonable for a patient to ask, doctor, but wait, can't we just record this because I want my wife or my adult child or my young person, whatever parent, I want them to understand what I'm going through. Can we just record this conversation so that I can play it to my dad when I'm back at home? Those sort of scenarios happen all the time. Dement patient, elderly patients, they might be a bit forgetful. So there might be benefit in actually recording the consultation so that the patient can listen to it again and again and again. When must they take the tablets? What did the doctor say? What must I look out for if there's a complication? There might be a dozen legitimate reasons for recording such a consultation above board. Also, I know a lot of the psychology and mental health practitioners occasionally record a consultation for the patient to listen to again, the psychology part, the treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy on a recording. All that is fine. But if you're risking a breach of patient confidentiality, for example, without the patient knowing, or even with the patient knowing, but awkward body parts being exposed, would you want to sit in a doctor's consultation room if you had a particularly private problem or not, and you were recorded, and now suddenly there's somebody else that could see you? There are a few hurdles. So when you get there, ask us advice and we'll give it to you in writing, good advice, up to date. There are obstacles that just need to be thought through. All right, Barry, I'm going to move on, and I'll move a little bit quicker. In fact, are there more questions? Because then I can pause a bit. But what I want to show you is this is the sort of stuff that we help with. This is just a slide summary of what we do and what doctors ask us help for. Okay, so regulatory, though it's a smart word for the HPCSA. Remember, there's a disciplinary process at the HPCSA. You, as medical students, are registered at the HPCSA. Patients can complain about you. Family members of patients can complain about you at the HPCSA, and you would fall under their remit, and you would have to defend yourself, and we can do that. If there is a complaint about your clinical care, if there's a disciplinary hearing about your clinical care, then we would help. Usually, it's the clinical bits that we do, okay? Remember, if there's now a complaint or a disciplinary because you parked in the wrong parking bay, that wouldn't fall to us, because that's not clinical patient care, all right? But if there was an allegation or a complaint or a disciplinary hearing about your clinical patient care, well, we would usually assist with that. We give advice. That's just quick and easy. So that question you had there just now about, can I put a CCTV camera into my practice and consultation room? That's the sort of advice we would give. We would get you. Advice about consent in children. I've got an 11-year-old and the father wants to know all about this patient's, the 11-year-old's treatment. Can I disclose it to the father or not? There's endless scenarios of advice, and I'll show you some slides just now. Yes, report if you have to write a report, or if you're requested to share information in a report, we'll help you. We can help you. Inquest when a patient dies. Remember, unnatural deaths, inquest follows. I suggest you do get help, medico-legal help promptly within a patient death. Everything from which certificate, which death notification form to fill in, natural, unnatural, all of that, all the way through to an inquest. The inquests have potential risk for doctors because a patient has died and there could be a concern that there was an act or omission of anybody that contributed to the death, which could trigger a criminal charge of culpable homicide. You're aware that there are a number of doctors over the last few years who have been criminally charged in South Africa with murder, culpable homicide, fraud, sexual assault, and so on. So these things happen. Yes.
Is it worth somewhere between the inquest and the criminal stuff just to explain how low the threshold is in South Africa for a murder charge?
Yes, I can do that. Maybe I'm going to try and do that when we get to criminal, maybe, if I remember.
Problem. Sure.
We have a press office that can help our members. You would have seen a lot of press coverage recently of various high-profile matters, medico-legal matters, and our press office could probably, and usually does, help with that sort of stuff. We can get statements out on your behalf. We can manage journalists on your behalf because it gets very stressful. We help with Good Samaritan Acts. And yes, we help with claims in negligence, so being sued if you're in private practice. And just briefly, Barry did mention, if you're in private practice, we would help you with a claim. If you were working in the state sector, the state provides that indemnity to you for a claim. So we wouldn't provide you with that. And that is why the subscriptions to MPS for state-employed doctors are much less than those in private practice. You get exactly the same, except for the claims, which you pay for in the slightly higher subs, and that's why we do the claims for the private practitioners, because the state defends claims in the state sector. All right, I am aware of the time, so I want to actually move a little bit faster. Mary, shall I carry on, or shall we ask more questions?
I actually had a thought, and then it slipped out again. It's been a long day, but yeah, I'll think of it again, I'm sure.
Okay, maybe I'll just go a lot faster now because I do want to.
One thing, perhaps we should just explain Good Samaritan Acts a little bit better.
Yeah, well,
I don't think everybody is everybody familiar with it, or would you like to have a bit of an
I've got a slide on it, so I'll gladly speak to it. All right, well, let's just start. I'll go a bit faster. We get HPCSA complaints on Namibia. We also help in Namibia. So if you want to do your ComServe or whatever, your doctor's MOU in Namibia, we'll gladly help you there. And this was a case where there was a post-op bleeding that was missed, and there was a delayed diagnosis of this post-operative bleed. The patient was discharged, unfortunately, then readmitted with further complications and hypotension. There was a manner and attitude issue by various staff who were very rude, and the patient was sent home again late that night, and then the patient died. And there was a complaint against the various doctors at the HPCSA, and this is a true case. We helped with that. Here's a few others. Complaints at the HPCSA, just briefly: bedside manner, how rude or not you are, manner and attitude, are you polite, clinical care, diagnosis, treatment, complications, everything. And remember, a complaint can be raised not only by the patient, but also by their family, or even a colleague or staff or the nurses or the hospital manager or an attorney, anybody. So anybody can complain about you at the HPCSA. I said we help with complaints, and this is a particular case where there was a clinical issue regarding the cancer diagnosis and treatment. The patient received chemotherapy and was then unfortunately readmitted with various complications, including sepsis. There was a bleeding tendency. It was a terrible, horrible stay in ICU and the patient died. So there was a complaint against the doctor. I'm sharing this just so that you get a flavor for what's out there. Other complaints that we get, yes, interestingly and sadly, we had a patient fall out of a hospital bed, and because your name was on the sticker of the hospital file, you received a complaint. Of course, you weren't there when the patient fell out. It was in the middle of the night. You were not there. You weren't even on duty that day, but your name is named and the complaint is about you. There's misdiagnosis and delays in cancer diagnosis. We've got wrong medication. I've got a whole talk on medication errors. Very interesting, very sad. So be careful about how you write your prescriptions when you get there. I trust you already write some prescriptions. We've had social media issues, complaints about you mismanaging social media. And we've had unhappy family members who complain about the care and treatment you get. Disciplinary scenario is exactly the same. This was an internal departmental complaint that resulted in a disciplinary hearing because the doctor was allegedly had sexually assaulted a patient during consultation. Remember, I spoke a lot about that. The doctor was suspended, and because we were able to help, we found the process to be unfair, and it was substantively also unfair. So the doctor was reinstated. But this happened during a clinical setting. Okay, and we've had disciplinaries about a psychiatric patient being sectioned. We've had a cesarean section where there was the death of the baby and the mom. We've had a patient disciplinary hearing about a doctor who transferred a patient to ICU. We've had disciplinaries about accessing transplant services and the wrong medication or dosages prescribed. Again, I'm just sharing this just so that you get a flavor for what's out there. We've given lots of advice for various things. This was a state doctor where the state hospital's manager wrote a letter to all their employees, the doctor employees, and said that they were personally liable for any and all medico-legal claims that arise from their conduct, and that the money will be taken off their salary and pensions. So we were able to give some brief factual advice and just help and reassure the doctor that that is just not acceptable. And they don't really need to worry because it would be completely unlawful and illegal for the hospital manager to do that. But
Well, that actually was in Gauteng.
Yeah.
There was a circular that was sent out from the Department of Health in Gauteng. It was sent out as a circular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were able to.
And that, of course, upset a whole host of Gauteng employed doctors. And they came to us asking advice on what is this. Now, we know the medico-legal landscape, so we were able to give some very brief advice only.
And then there are, of course, cases where, let's just say the state prosecutor or state's attorney, rather, conveniently forgets that they're supposed to pick up the claims part. And in that case, you're sitting with a lawyer's letter that you've received, but actually the Department of Health should have picked this one up, and then we can just kindly remind the state's attorney of their responsibility towards
We asked them to step up and shape up. There's other advice. I mean, we've had, what must you do when you know that a particular HIV positive patient is not disclosing that information to their sexual partner, wife, or whatever? There's lots of these sort of advice. I've mentioned consenting kids. Many of you will be examining patients in casualty after an assault. You'll be filling in J88 forms, and then 4 years down the line, you'll be asked and receive a subpoena to go to court. We can help you with that, and so on. There's a whole range of these sort of advice files. We do occasionally get Jehovah's Witness patients who refuse blood products, and we help with that, and so on. Yes, reports. This was a patient who was in a motor vehicle accident, severe polytrauma, was admitted to a general ward, and then there was infection, and it is alleged that there was poor care. There was ICU admissions, and so on and so on. And then the lawyers asked for a report of the doctor, knowing that this is going to go legal. And then you, of course, you need to be careful. What do you put into that report? If you ever ask to write a report, please come to us early. We've got fact sheets on it. We can help you how to write a good report. And I've got a whole talk on that as well. Reports for the police, for hospital managers, for attorneys, for courts, for family members, for insurers, and so on. There's a whole range of these scenarios where you might be asked to write a report on a patient's care, even from many years ago. Don't just fire off a report. Come to us, we'll guide you. Okay.
Yeah, if in doubt,
Yes.
just ask. It's not going to change anything about your risk profile or anything like that. In fact, if you're asking for advice, it's generally
That's just
an
quick
indication that you are aware of the risk, and we would very happily rather help you than have you go firing off something blindly and it comes back to
Yes.
bite you.
And we do see that the quick fixes where doctors think they can quickly solve the problem usually doesn't solve the problem. It causes trouble. So just come to us early on. This was an inquest. Obviously, the patient died after an abdominal operation. There was a complication. The bowel was perforated, unfortunately, by the surgeon. It was just a horrible, sad, complicated story. Patient had to undergo 3 resurgeries. There was a death, and then there was an inquest. And of course, that can be very frightening for a doctor. And this doctor asked our help with the inquest. And of course, we were able to give that. And here's a whole range of other type of scenarios where inquests are held. They're usually held when there's an unnatural death. So if a patient dies of an unnatural death, then there is an inquest. And you can just see here, I mean, this is just usual clinical care where patients present. Criminal, this was a particular case that I was helping with. This was a senior doctor in a rural area. There were 5-year-old was burnt by paraffin, and they came to the casualty unit, and the patient died shortly after the visit to the casualty unit, and the police were investigating the doctor for culpable homicide against that casualty doctor, and they were alleging that the doctor was negligent in his treatment and caused the patient's death, and now they're charging him with culpable homicide. This dragged out for a long time, but fortunately we managed to extricate the doctor after about 2.5 years. Very stressful, very unpleasant. These are really tough cases. And here we've got alleged assaults, these are allegations against doctors, charges of alleged assault, indecent assault, rape, we've spoken about it. Medication errors that cause death. We had an arterial injury during an operation where the patient bled to death on the table, and the doctors were charged with culpable homicide. And then we have doctors and students and junior doctors being accused of stealing hospital equipment. Be careful what you put in your pockets when you do your ward rounds. Be careful what you have in your bags and your pockets as you leave the hospital, because the security at the front gate might choose to look in your boot, might look in your bag, might look in your pockets of the white jackets you wear. And if they find hospital equipment, and it has happened, and we have been asked to help with a medical student who was accused of stealing. And in that particular case, I'm convinced they were not stealing, but just be aware of how you manage that scenario, okay? Don't walk out with a bag full of syringes. Yes.
Sorry, Volker, just before you leave the criminal stuff, maybe just that thing on the low threshold for a murder charge.
Okay.
Because we've seen that in the news recently, and people might actually wonder, like, how the heck does a doctor get charged with murder when he's trying to do
Yes.
his
Now,
normal job?
okay, I'm going to try and explain this. In South Africa, you can be charged with culpable homicide if the treatment you gave was negligent and the patient died. Now, noting that there's no intention to kill anybody there. It is negligent treatment. So that doctor doesn't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm going to be negligent today and I'm going to go and hurt or kill a patient. The doctor woke up in the morning wanting to do a good job. Unfortunately, they were negligent. Unfortunately, they died. So they might be charged with culpable homicide. If you compare that to, for example, other countries in the world, and in particular now up north here in the UK or Scotland, the mere fact that somebody here is negligent doesn't equal culpable homicide. In other territories, you have to be guilty of recklessness. So you're not just negligent, you have to be recklessly negligent. And there's a step up from negligent to recklessly negligent. And that then you can be charged with the equivalent of culpable homicide in other countries. So in South Africa, unfortunately, the threshold, this is what Barry is suggesting, and he's right. In South Africa, unfortunately, the threshold to be charged with culpable homicide is comparatively lower compared to other countries. So what am I saying? I'm saying that unfortunately, the South African legal system is such that it is easier to charge a doctor in South Africa with culpable homicide than in other countries or in many other countries. And that is rather frightening if you think about it. That's the summary. Now, we have a talk on criminalizing doctors. And if you were interested in that, Barry, you're welcome to set it up, and then we can talk about 20 minutes on this.
I think maybe our next one should rather be around the social media pitfalls.
Fair enough. I've got lots of cases on that.
Yeah, there actually have been a couple of questions that have come through about that. And then I think, so Donata has a very interesting question here, and it's probably going to lead into some of the stuff that it leads into that confidentiality. She says, do we actually have the power to change the way in which confidentiality is breached? We see disclosure during ward rounds among other patients, handover meetings, and in a student setting when we have to take pictures of patients' files as proof for portfolios, etc. So she says, is there not a structural tear in the system? What pragmatic methods can we employ? She says to inhibit this, but I suppose just to reduce your risk of being in breach of confidentiality.
And that's a very good question. And the most common breach of confidentiality is these sort of inadvertent breaches of talking, sharing, leaving files open, that sort of stuff. I don't have a quick answer because it'll depend on the hospital and the policies of the hospital and what is expected of you. But even something like a hospital policy is subordinate to the law of the country, the law of the land, or to the ethical regulations. So you are bound by the ethical rules and the laws of South Africa, and you could be judged accordingly. You could be interrogated, and you might have to justify yourself. Now, if you need to, I don't know what the rules say, but if you have to keep a logbook or whatever, I would suggest that you keep that information anonymized. Maybe you don't want to put patient names and dates of birth and identifying data there. But of course, you also need to have adequate proof that you've seen the patient or you've consulted with him. Now, I think the thing you raise is a very genuine and realistic one. It happens out there every day to you guys. Those problems you need to discuss with your intern coordinator or with your consultants or the hospital managers. What is the academic, the university policy regarding keeping of this information? For how long should you keep it? Is it reasonable to keep only a little bit of information, or do you really need to keep the long information and everything?
Yeah, so Volker, the problem is, and I've seen it too, the logbooks that they have to keep require the names of the patients as evidence.
Yeah.
So there possibly is a bit of an education piece to do with the universities that perhaps using the patient's names is not necessarily so desirable.
Well, it falls to the university. Now, actually, I can't give you the medico-legal advice now, but whoever asked this question, if you are a member of MPS, why don't you write in and let us mull it over and see if we can come up with an answer for you? So I'm going to invite you, write in and ask us the question, but be detailed about the scenarios that you're facing. And if you're an MPS member, then we might be able to help you and give you some advice. So fair question. That's the sort of advice question we'll deal with.
She'll have approval of her membership in the next 2 or 3 days, so 2 or 3 working days, and then she can write in.
Yeah, then we can get a legal opinion on it if the team feels that's necessary or something. So we might be able to give you some advice and a steer. All right, I've mentioned the media and press support that we do. I'm going to just go a little bit faster there. We have journalists arriving at doctors' doors, private practice in the hospital, state hospital, various publications, news medias, news agencies, confronting doctors. Also, I've said actors, politicians, and murder suspects. Remember, high-profile people, politicians that have medical problems, you cannot share their personal information, but you might be confronted by a journalist who corners you in the passage and says, "Oh, what is? We understand that politician Hitzeroth has been admitted to this hospital. How are they doing?" You need to be careful there. Okay, don't disclose information, and so on and so on. Don't comment on social media to your mates. "Oh, listen, politician Hitzeroth has been admitted to my hospital." You know, be careful about how and what you manage there. Remember, if politician Hitzeroth has been admitted to your hospital, and if you are not part of the treatment team, then you shouldn't go there. You shouldn't look at their notes. You shouldn't ask the treating team what is wrong with politician Hitzeroth. You don't need to know. You shouldn't know. You shouldn't be accessing that information. And definitely don't go into the ward and look at politician Hitzeroth's file when you're on duty for the other ward. All right, so be aware of those sort of things. They can have serious consequences.
Don't do a Princess Kate.
Yes. And there are scenarios in the South African history in the last few years where this has happened. Prominent people in hospital and staff have disclosed confidential patient information onto social media and into the news arena. And you don't want to be the one doing that. We got to Good Samaritan Act. And this is, I'm coming to the end now. Good Samaritan Acts are occasions where you happen to come across people who are in need and who need medical care. So, for example, on flights, you're flying from Durban to Joburg or Durban to Cape Town, and there's a mid-air emergency. And they ask, are there any doctors on board? Anybody who's got first aid training, any paramedics? That would be a Good Samaritan Act, where you happen to stumble across a medical emergency in your everyday run of doing things where you are not on duty. So a Good Samaritan Act happens when you are not on duty, but you stumble across it. And there, on my next slide, and I'll show you now, is where they are either on the airplanes or you're driving along and there's a big car accident and you stop and you help. That's a Good Samaritan Act. Or you're on the beach in Durban, and I've been there as well, and you see somebody drowning in the sea. That would be a Good Samaritan Act, going there and doing your medical help. Fires and so on, where there's an unintended scenario that you stumble across where you help. That is a Good Samaritan Act. And I want to maybe just contrast that to a different scenario where many of our doctors ask us, I've been appointed to be the medic on duty at my child's rugby match in the school. That is not a Good Samaritan Act, because you're actually being appointed to help at the rugby match. So you're not by accident stumbling across a medical emergency. You're actually going there, asked to manage medical emergencies, and you are there in your role as a doctor. While if you're on the airplane, you're there in your role as a passenger. You're not the airplane's identified medic. And that's a big difference that people seem to struggle with occasionally, okay? And I've been on many flights, and I've been asked 3 times to help on a flight. Sorry?
No problem. And then maybe just the international setting as well. If you are in a foreign country or on your way to a foreign country, or you are outside of the borders of South Africa and you have get into a Good Samaritan Act. Ah, here we go. Volker is getting.
Well, the short and long of that, ladies and gentlemen, is wherever you're flying in the world, if you engage in a true Good Samaritan Act on any airline anywhere in the world, we'll defend you. Okay. So it doesn't matter if it's a true, genuine Good Samaritan Act. And if somebody was to cause you medico-legal trouble in relation to that act, MPS can assist you worldwide. That's very generous, by the way.
Provided you were a member, of course, at the time.
Yes. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to close up, coming to the end now. I've mentioned that we help with claims in civil claims in alleged negligence. In the private practice, private practitioners, we help. And in the state sector, the state has to step in as per the treasury regulations. And so the state would pick up that claim on your behalf. But they would not usually pick up the HPCSA and the inquest and the disciplinary and the complaint and the report, all of that. The state does not usually assist with that. And that's where we then come in. And that's what Barry mentioned, that we can assist you with those things. So I'm going to close up with the last sort of 5 or 6 slides. I've shown you a taste of what's out there. I've shown you what is waiting for you. I've shown you some of the stuff that you can do to limit and mitigate that risk. And I want you now to behave as if this is the day that I will be remembered on good behavior as per Dr. Zeus. So I want you to do the following. I want you in your clinical career from tomorrow morning, introduce yourself and be polite. Have a good manner and attitude. Be friendly. I want you to care for your patients, and I want you to put that care first before everything else. Then, of course, I want you to look after yourself and your own well-being. You are the young ones, and I'm going to say this, and I want you to hear this, because I think, and we occasionally do believe, that your ethical gut feel is probably more tuned and more alive than the senior colleagues who are burnt out and cynical and who have been polluted by the environment and the systems they work in. If you think something is not right, heed that gut feel and get advice. Ask a senior colleague, ask somebody you trust, ask a supervisor, ask us. So trust your ethical gut feel. You might actually be right, because you're probably very much in tune with that and you've not been a victim of cynicism and burnout. Always ensure you have medico-legal indemnity or insurance from early on. You cannot practice anywhere in the world, including South Africa, without proper indemnity or insurance. If there's a problem, contact your indemnifier or insurer promptly. Don't waste time. Call us, email us promptly. We can help you from early on and make sure it doesn't escalate if we can possibly do that. Always keep good contemporaneous notes. And that is a problem for junior doctors as it is for senior consultants and specialists. People rush, they don't write good notes. And I want you to go out from tomorrow morning and write good notes. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to find good role models. Find the people you trust and that do good medicine and that treat patients well. And I want you to emulate them, and I want you to learn them, and I want you to interrogate them, and I want you to ask them questions so that you can become good like your role model. You're on your own and you know what you know. You are the guy who will decide where to go. It'll be you who makes these decisions about your career and your life and your patient care. I don't want you to do the following. Never panic in medicine, okay? Do not panic if there's a medico-legal problem. Never panic. Don't just fire off responses to Tom, Dick, and Harry or the Sunday Times or the Huisgenoot because you feel like it and you feel it's all unfair. Just stop and breathe. Don't panic. Come to us. Don't practice outside your scope. If you're a neurosurgeon, then you can do neurosurgery, but you can't do other stuff. If you're a physician, you need to be careful about treating kids. If you're a pediatrician, be careful about treating adults. Do not take generic consent. Take detailed, informed consent and write that in the notes. Don't share patients' personal clinical information without consent. Do not do anything unethical or unlawful. Do not agree or pay money to people without MPS input. And the reason I put that there is we've had doctors who are being extorted and blackmailed. Do not change clinical notes. Never change clinical notes. If there's a problem and you want to correct notes, you put a new entry with a new date, and we can help you with that. Ask us. Don't chase the money. The moment you want to go into private practice, money reigns king, queen. Don't. Look after your patient. The money will follow. Remain professional, provide good patient care, and be the good doctors that you are and that you can be, and that you want to be. Don't ignore or hide issues. If there's a problem, flag it open. Talk to somebody in confidence. Ask advice. Talk to a supervisor. talk to a trusted colleague, come to us. I've said they do not use social media, but of course it means do not use social media in an unprofessional manner. All right. Be cautious about what you like and dislike on social media. Be cautious the photos you share. Be cautious what you post and what your commentary is about. Think back now, over the last week or so, did you post something that could be potentially embarrassing? I don't know, you will know. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. You are the young ones, ladies and gentlemen. You've got places to go. You've got books to read. You've got things to study. On and on you will hike. And I know that you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. And that's what I would like you to do, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to study, read, become good doctors. And then if there are problems, face up to them and get advice from us early on. So Barry, I think I'm going to stop there. We've done very well for time. It's been a long evening, and I'm very grateful to all of you. If there are questions, and I see there is a hand, I'll gladly take questions. I'm in no rush now, so if you've got questions, feel free to ask. I'm maybe going to try and stop screen sharing, though, if that's possible, so that we can see each other. I don't know how to do that. Stop share. There we go. There we go. There is a question or two.
Yeah, 7S, and where are you?
I think, Mr. Nord, if you want to just quickly do the insurance and indemnity one, it would actually help me with my question that I have, which can be after that.
Okay, so Volker, I'm just going to ask you to give a little bit more, but essentially, medical protection is not an insurance company. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the word stokvel, but medical protection, and I'm sure Volker is squirming in his seat, but
No, go.
it is essentially a glorified stokvel, because everybody who belongs in the same risk category puts money into a pot for a given year, and anybody who needs assistance for an incident that happened in that year gets assisted from that pot. So it literally works like a glorified stokvel. MPS is a mutual society. We're probably one of the world's last standing true mutual societies. Our very existence centers around looking after the members. We were founded by doctors, for doctors, eventually started including dentists, and then nurses in certain contexts, and physios and OTs, and you name it. And in fact, I'm beginning to think I own 3/4 of UKZN's OT students by now. So they are very aware of it, and I must probably write a nice little thank you letter to the head of department there, who's probably been instrumental in that. And I'm sure Kiara and her team have also done a very good job too. But yeah, so that is what medical protection does. Any other indemnity product in South Africa is going to be an insurance product, and it is a short-term insurance product. And it works a lot like the short-term insurance on your car or on a car. Not sure how many of you have cars yet. I certainly didn't have a car while I was at varsity. But you have a policy, and that policy covers you, or you have cover rather, while you have an active policy in place. Once you cancel that policy, all cover stops. Now, in terms of professional indemnity as a doctor, you have an out there, which means that you can actually buy a thing called tail cover. So most of the policies in South Africa, they build 3, 5, or 7 years in. There's a catch. And I mean, any of you, if you have seen an insurance contract, you'll see that there are reams of terms and conditions. We don't come with those reams of terms and conditions. And one of those terms and conditions are that if you move from that particular insurance company to another provider of indemnity, all tail cover stops. certainly in South Africa. So you are then left carrying the can for your own indemnity for that period that you were with them, unless you have already reported an incident from that period. If you've already reported it, if you've already reported the incident, then you will likely get assistance with it. If, of course, you've complied with the reams of terms and conditions. On the medical protection side, like I said, we don't have those terms and conditions. We essentially ask 3 questions in the very simplest form. The first one is, were you a member at the time of the incident? Secondly, were you paid up in the correct membership grade? So you guys are lucky. You get it all for free until the end of your first year of grade 1 medical officer. Then the third thing is, were you working within your declared scope of practice, which is also not going to be a problem for most of you, unless you get called on to do something, and maybe Volker can expound on that a little bit more. But we ask those 3 questions, and essentially, if they're all yes, we start looking for ways to help you. That third one about the scope of practice, the Good Samaritan Acts is the exception. So if the psychiatrist gets called on to look off or try and help a cardiac patient on an international flight and still ends up getting sued, then we will help the psychiatrist wherever that case is brought in the world. We will find a way to help them. So those are the 2 major differences. Volker?
Yes, I'm happy with that. I'm quite all right. I won't add anything there. I just want to, did you want to ask a separate question then? I think you said.
I think I bored him to death.
So yeah, there was one question that was related to that, which you've now answered, which is great. Thank you. So from my understanding, basically, MPS is more for the medical legal side of things in terms of representation, advice, that kind of thing, bridging the gap between medicine and the legalities that could follow. Okay, so that was answered. One of the questions that I would like to ask, and it's probably something that you guys have been talking about recently, is how do you think the NHI would affect risk protection by entities like MPS, and is it still something that obviously would be going forward? And then the second question I actually had was a little bit of a separate thing, probably more related to the insurances. Is there's something that comes with protection from you guys is in the event of a process of anything legal, is income protection something that you guys consider, or is that something that needs to be then covered by a separate entity?
Well, I think your last question is the easiest one, so we'll take that out of the way. Income protection is not something that we do. That would fall within the remit of a short-term insurance company. They're the guys that look after that kind of thing. And yes, there are several of them in the country. Wouldn't take you very long to find a broker who will be able to help you with an income protection.
Maybe I can talk about the NHI, but the answer there would be, look, we're very aware of NHI. We're very informed. We inform ourselves. We know what's happening. Probably up to, I don't want to say up to the minute, but we know we receive information, and we canvass information about NHI. So I know about the difficulties and the debates this way and that way, and the pros and the cons and the processes and the legal challenges that are happening. And maybe from a medico-legal point of view, the one thing that we've identified for a long time already is that at the moment, the current debate regarding NHI doesn't really provide much information on medico-legal issues and indemnity and insurance or cover or whatever you want to call it. So at the current time, that is a big lacuna in the NHI debate that will have to be addressed at some stage. We know there's a medico-legal, I don't want to call it a crisis, but you could very well call it a crisis in South Africa, state and private sector. State liabilities are in the billions. They're bankrupting health departments, those liabilities. Private sector is
basically the state's liability in terms of indemnity at the moment, and I know because I had to do a presentation about it just the other day. 270 billion rand in 3 years. It's essentially half the National Department of Health's budget for those 3 years. So now you can imagine all of those hospitals with all of these medical legal claims, they've got roughly on average half their budget that has to be reserved for claims indemnity that they've got to cover.
So there is a problem. It's currently, I understand, not adequately addressed in the NHI. I'm absolutely convinced, 100%, that there will be a need for medico-legal indemnity going forward, even in the NHI. Because if you've got doctors practicing medicine in private or NHI or state or wherever, there will be medico-legal issues and they will need indemnity going forward. At some shape or form, there'll be medico-legal indemnity need.
But unfortunately, the Act in its current form is completely silent on indemnity.
Yeah.
So that is a big worry point for everybody who is in the medical fraternity in South Africa.
But will there be a need for indemnity? Absolutely.
Definitely. So it needs to be addressed at some point, but at the moment, in its current form, it is completely silent on the indemnity of anybody working within the system. And that is probably one of the reasons why the NHI bill is going to be circling in courts for a very long time still to come. Bongin Schlangsla, you had
Is there
a
another
question.
hand?
Yes. So during the process of an inquest, is the doctor allowed to still practice?
Yes, good question. I'm not aware of a scenario where a doctor has been deregistered during the inquest process. So I'm not aware of that. Practically what we see is that, and I'll talk you through a quick scenario. You see consulting a patient today and you're doing an operation. The patient develops some complications tomorrow, maybe a bowel perforation or an internal bleed or sepsis or whatever. Long story short, the patient dies end of the week or over the next weekend. Now it's an unnatural death. Remember, because there was a procedural death. So it's unnatural. So it goes to forensic pathology and it goes down that route. It's not a natural death. So you cannot just take the body and bury it. It'll go down the forensic pathology route. There's a post-mortem and then there's an inquest docket opened. Now, unfortunately in South Africa, this process now from that point until the inquest happens can be many, many, many years. We've had scenarios where we are talking about multiple years between the patient's death and the actual inquest. Now, during that time, the doctor can practice. I'm not aware that they have been deregistered. The doctor can practice as long as he's registered at the HPCSA. During the inquest proceedings, there are different types of inquest, which I don't need to go into the detail now, but if it is an inquest, a formal inquest, and there are other types, but if it is a formal inquest, then it could end up like a court case. So the doctor would then have to appear before the magistrate with legal representation or advice and so on and so on. But yes, the short answer is the mere fact that there is an inquest doesn't mean the doctor has to stop practicing. There could be another reason why the doctor has to stop practicing. There could have been an HPCSA complaint, and maybe the unprofessional conduct was so gross that the doctor was erased from the register, and then he can't practice. But that's because of the disciplinary process through the HPCSA, not because of the inquest.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
And maybe just before we finish, can I just ask if you have other topics that you want us to talk about, just put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A or whatever, so Barry can harvest them. I think the one big one that you've already mentioned is social media. So I'll gladly have a chat about social media if you wanted it. Just talk to Barry about it. But if there are other topics, just jot them down there as well.
Yeah, and of course, Kiara is in the meeting. So if you want to raise it through your SAMSA people or through your class reps or something, we are very open to hosting this kind of thing. If you have a particular topic, we've now picked up that social media pitfalls, which we have done several times before, and we have a lot of resource on, we can do that. But if you have anything else that becomes a burning issue, you're very welcome to let us know, and we can put something together for you. Right.
Right.
Last questions, anybody? I think everybody's tired by now, Volker.
No problem. It's been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for your time and attention. Much appreciated.
So within the next, I think Zoom allows us to access the record pretty soon. I think it's within about 24 hours. So I'll be able to make an arrangement with Kiara, meet you guys maybe in the parking lot of the Kareth building or somewhere around there. I'll also find out who's where. I know the 5th years, you guys are usually traveling in groups somewhere around. I'll make a plan to get some goodies to you, just nice gifts to remember MPS by. 7SN, you definitely win hands down in terms of the most interesting questions and the most participation. So congratulations, you are the winner of a 250 Rand Takealot voucher, and I'll put together a nice little package for you too. Bongen Schlanschla, you are up next, and I will certainly put something together for you as well. And there will be a Takealot voucher in there too. I just need to scratch around and see how I'm going to work that, because my boss is Scottish and notoriously stingy, but I'll sail around him somehow. Volker is smiling because he's met my boss. Kiara, I think we are pretty much done, unless anybody else has anything that they would like to add or question or anything like that. If you have anything at all, like a question, and I'll just quickly pop my cell number in the chat, and then you can. Did I get my own number right? Yes, I did. Right, then you've got it there. You are very welcome to contact me. You are welcome to send it through the SAMSA committee, and then I think we can wrap up. I think Kiara's fallen asleep.
Sorry, thank you so
No.
much for both of you for your time. And yes, please, if anyone has any questions and they want to go through SAMSA or communicate with anyone, please contact us via our numbers. Personally, I'm okay with anybody sending me a personal message in regards to anything MPS related. Thank you guys so much for your time. It was a very informative conversation. I hope everybody took away something.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kiara, and everybody else for attending. Thanks, Kiara and her team, for organizing it and promoting it. And yeah, very happy to do something with you guys again in the future. And please don't forget, those of you who have signed up, if you can give me some just some evidence that you've signed up people, then for every 8 or 10, I can certainly throw some money at you. And yeah, have a wonderful, what little remains of the week, and I hope you actually get some weekend too. Kiara, are you guys going on holiday soon?
I believe we close this week or the as a whole.
Okay. Yeah, I've got my OT student daughter here from UCT at the moment. Again, please don't judge me on that. It was the first place that she managed to get into. So we would far rather have had her here in Durban, but things didn't quite work out that way. You get in where you can, I think, these days. But yeah, enjoy your holiday, and I look forward to seeing some of you guys again soon. Thanks so much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.